you, Frank. And you should know I was listening to every word you said. Every word. You can quiz me after. Okay. Okay, thank you so much. All right, the city's top doctor calling it a blunt warning. Toronto reporting over 700 new COVID cases on Monday, and Tuesday breaking records 2 days in a row. Mayor John Tory joins me now for a weekly check-in on what we are keeping our eye on. Good morning to you, Mayor.
Good morning, Mel.
Let's begin here. This warning from Dr. Eileen de Villa and the news that was coming out yesterday, and the stat of 1 in 5 people who are infected in these new cases admitted. Yeah, I did. I went to someone's house. When you hear these stats, when you hear that it's blatant, it's obvious, they're just not abiding by the rules and have said, I'm not doing it. How do you feel?
Well, it's very frustrating because, what you don't want to do is what you were suggesting earlier on, which is bring in more restrictions, simply because I think people, feel there are lots of restrictions on now, and there are, and it's making life unpleasant, especially at this time of the year. But having said all that, it is frustrating. But I think most people are actually complying with the rules. And, again, we overcomplicate it sometimes by having all the different restrictions for different kinds of businesses, and it confuses people from what is a very, very simple message, namely, stay home and, stay, love the ones you're with, entertain yourselves with the people you live with, don't have people over, don't socialize, don't go out to other people's houses. People will say, well, it was only 2 friends we had over, or I only went to see 3 friends for 5 minutes. Those kinds of contacts, unfortunately, and we don't know for sure exactly who gets the virus where and when. We know in some cases, but not everyone. Those are the opportunities for people to have contact with others and have the virus spread. So, people should just follow that fairly simple advice. Stay home and stay on your own with the people you live with, and do that for the next little while. And we really will be able to make great progress on this.
Mm-hmm. The letter written by upwards of 50 retailers calling on the government to reconsider opening up some of the non-essential businesses so that some of these smaller businesses had an opportunity, or have an opportunity, especially during a critical time. What are your thoughts on that, and should the province reconsider?
Well, we're talking about these things all the time, but I will just say that, right now, the restrictions that were put in place by the province were done based on expert medical advice, and that expert medical advice hasn't changed. They haven't come to us and said, well, things are so good. I mean, as evidenced by the fact that the numbers are what you talked about a moment ago. And so, look, I understand completely the devastation this has caused for different kinds of retailers. But at the moment, what we're doing is saying, well, fine, there's a way in which people, again, through their own behavior, can help out by going online with their local retailers or by phoning them up. You can just phone them up and buy something over the phone and go and do the curbside pickup. And we've created a lot of places around the city where you can pull in for a few minutes to pick something up from a store. I know it's not ideal. I know there are apparent unfairnesses as between the way these rules were set up by the province. But at the end of the day, again, we got expert medical advice on what the right thing was to do to wrestle this virus to the ground. And that's what we're doing. And I think people, more so than anything else, want this over. They want this nightmare over with. And so, there we are.
Some disturbing numbers coming recently from Thorncliffe Park Public School with asymptomatic testing and turning up a number of people who were tested positive who typically wouldn't have been tested. Obviously, these are areas where we've seen a large concentration of COVID cases. Do you see more of this happening across our city in those specific pockets?
Yes, because we're proactively going out to make sure that it does happen, in the sense that we're going to be doing much more aggressive testing in those areas. We're going to be reaching out to people. There's a lot of people in those areas of the city that have been very hard hit who are afraid to get tested. Because they're afraid they will then lose their jobs, and more importantly to them, lose their paychecks. And so it's one of the reasons we've been advocating as mayors across the region for the governments to do something about providing for sick pay for people who go and test positive and have to take 2 weeks off work. I mean, it is absolutely sinful that you are causing people to be put in a position where they have to go to work with symptoms, probably sick with the virus, and then spread it to the other people they work with. And so we're doing things like that and reaching out to provide all kinds of extra supports in neighborhoods like Thorncliffe, Flemington, and in Northeast Scarborough and in Northwest Toronto, because those are areas where people live in very close quarters. Obviously, sometimes 2 families or 2 generations in an apartment. They work in settings where they're working close by with other people, and say food processing and other places like that, warehouses. And so we've simply got to step in and take extra measures to support those people, but also to do extra testing in those areas so that we can find the people who have the virus and offer them the chance, for example, to self-isolate in a hotel we've got set up specifically to take people who might live in a crowded apartment and offer them a place they can go if they test positive, so they don't infect all the other members of the family.
Mayor Tory, we had a really interesting conversation here earlier on about the discussion of whether or not, when a COVID vaccine is available, whether or not employers should mandate it. Do you think the City of Toronto would do something like that, mandate to employees to get a vaccine?
We haven't had that discussion yet, but I will say this. What we do with children's vaccinations is we say, look, we're going to say that you have to have one if you want your kids to go to the school. And that's in order to protect your own children, their health, but also to protect the health of other kids. So we're going to have to think through that terribly difficult balancing act between the broader public interest in public health and making sure we stop the spread of this virus, which is what the vaccine is meant to do, versus the, I'll call it the civil liberties or the personal charter rights of people to say, I don't want to be vaccinated. And it's a very difficult thing that government has to do. But we have in the past, said that there's certainly going to be a strong incentive, if you want to call it that, by saying for kids, if your kids aren't vaccinated against measles and all those things that they get vaccinated against now, then they can't come to the school system because they run the risk of infecting other kids who are there.
Lastly for you, I know you have to run, you have a busy morning, but on your agenda, you are speaking ahead of Executive Committee, which is next week. Is there anything specific that you'll be addressing?
Well, the agenda is going to come out today, and there's two reports I'm speaking about, one of which is suggesting that we should move forward with a vacant home tax, because, look, if you want to live in your own house, of course, that's great. If you want to rent your own house out to somebody else, that's great too. But we just can't afford, with the shortage of housing we have in the City of Toronto, to have people buying up units of, condos and houses and leaving them empty. And so the vacant home tax has been used successfully in Vancouver, and we're proposing we go ahead with it here. And then the other report suggests the need to move ahead as rapidly as we can with the advanced design work and so on for an LRT in Scarborough that would go from the Kennedy Station all the way through the U of T campus up to Malvern, and with a waterfront transit line that would cover all those developments we've seen along the waterfront, George Brown College, and a bunch of other residential developments, because we just can't go on anymore like we did in decades past, building all kinds of buildings for people to live and work in and having no transit.
Got that. Okay, citynews.ca will be following all of that. As always, Mayor Tory, appreciate your time. Next week, you come back for the fun. I know you've got a busy schedule this morning.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Okay, take care of yourself.